It's the third part of the video series on rules for exponents, and that will be section 3.1. So these guys are a little bit tougher, but if you needed to see more examples on negative exponents, then thanks for tuning in. So here's what we established in the last video. You want to take anything being raised to a negative exponent and move it. If it's on the top, you move it to the bottom. If it's on the bottom, move it to the top. Well, what's being raised to the negative second power? I would hope you know, since there's parentheses around that guy, that means the entire thing, meaning 3y squared, is being raised to a negative exponent. So I'm going to move him up top. And whenever we move something, we make the negative exponent positive. That makes it easier. So what's understood to be on the bottom of 1? So really, I wouldn't even need the bottom anymore for this one. But then the good news is, and assuming you know the rules for exponents, you just break out the chart, which, by the way, is in the notes here if you need to see it. And if you knew the rule for exponents in this case, one inside, one outside, which is raised to a power, you would multiply them. Now, if you coincidentally added them, you would have lucked out and you would have got y to the fourth, but it's times them. And then the other question is, well, what's happening to the 3? It's being squared. So what's 3 squared? 3 squared is 9, and that's it. All right, so I wrote moderate examples here, as in they're not easy, but they're not too tough. Let's see if you agree. But if you look at that first problem, it's kind of a mess. So I still think you're better off doing this. So I see a 4m that's being raised to a negative power. So I moved him down to the bottom. Now that n that's up on top there, he is not being raised to a negative power. He's going to stay. I'm going to write the exponent of 1. You don't have to. Okay, now real common mistake here on the bottom. I moved the entire 4m because it was in parentheses. In other words, the entire thing is being raised to a negative exponent. Do you see any parentheses on the bottom? So the question is the 3 being raised to the negative second power or just the m? And the answer is it's just the m, so no parentheses. So the 3 stays, but the m squared moves. And then lastly, there's an n to the negative first power, and I'm going to move him as well. So again, all the negative exponents are gone, makes the problem a little bit easier. So let's clean it up. So we could go ahead and mess with the top a little bit here. I see a pair of n's up there. N to the first and n to the first, if you add the exponents, gives you n to the second. Now on the bottom, I have to take care of this guy first, this little squared. So I would have to do 4 squared, which is 16. And the m is getting squared as well. So he'd be m squared. Keep going. Should have wrote the equal sign up here. That's okay. So on the bottom, I see some multiplication to do. I got to do 3 times 16, which is 48. And again, you just have to keep going until you can't find anything else to do. I get 2 m's and 2 m's, and if I subtract them, I have no m's left. But I am left with the n squared, and I am left with the 48. And that's it, as far as we can go. So not too bad. Number 5. Now, here's the one exception to the negative exponent rule. That negative 2 is inside a set of parentheses. I cannot move things out of parentheses. That's a mathematical law, right? So what we could do is we could just apply the rule first, which is always an option. And the rule for the exponents in this case is to times them. And I get negative 10. 2 to the 5th power. Again, pick up a calculator if you want. It's going to tell you it's 32. Well, that guy's understood to be over 1. So again, is the 32 being raised to the negative exponent? No. The 32 stays. And since the x is raised to a negative exponent, I move him to the bottom. And that's it. Nothing left to simplify that one. So you might be looking at 6 going, well, that's going to be the toughest one. But to me, I think it's actually easier. Here's why. So the PEMDAS thing, right? The P stands for parentheses. And I want to do what's inside the parentheses first. So I'm not even going to worry about that negative 1 exponent. I'm going to say, if I have 3 r's on top, and I have 5 r's on the bottom, and the rule is to subtract them, I subtract them, I got 2. Didn't mess with the 7 yet. Understood to be a 1 left on the top. So I made the problem a little bit easier by doing what was inside the parentheses first. So what's the negative exponent mean? It means stuff moves. What's being raised to a negative exponent? The entire thing is. So if I move the entire thing, meaning the 7r squared would move to the top, and the 1 would move to the bottom, and if this exponent becomes a 1, would I even need to have it anymore? And the answer is no. So that's it for that one. So that wasn't too bad. Now, believe it or not, you could have started off the problem by flipping it first, but you would eventually come up with the same answer. All right, these last two are supposed to be nasty. Let's see if they are or aren't. But if you notice, I've been making just fraction bars right off the bat with these. So I want to take anything to a negative exponent, which is that entire set of parentheses, and move it down to the bottom. What happened to the -2? Positive, that's the point. This other set of parentheses has been raised to a +2 exponent, so he's not going to move. Stays where he's at. So if you think about it, this problem kind of ends up being like the last problem we just did. Well, actually, it's going to look a lot like number 5, but I just have to kind of do it twice. So I'm going to do the top separately, and I'm going to say, well, that guy means 3 squared. 3 squared is 9. And I'm supposed to times the exponents, so I would get -2. So I can't move the negative exponent out of the parentheses. That's the only catch. On the bottom, that 2 is saying I got to square the 6, which is 36, times the exponents, I get -2. So we just keep going. Negative exponents have to be moved. So I'm going to move both x squareds, the one on the bottom to the top, the one on the top to the bottom, and I'll worry about my 9/36 in a second. So what would happen to the x squareds? I got 2 of them, subtract 2 of them, leaves none of them. So all I have left is that 9/36. And are you supposed to always reduce fractions? Yes. And I believe most of you have a calculator that would have literally reduced 9/36 for you and told you it was 1/4. So it shouldn't have been that big a deal. So for number 8, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ignore that guy for now. So I want to do what's inside the parentheses first anyway, right? Inside the parentheses, I see some negative exponents. So I'm going to leave that 4. I'm going to move the a to the second to the bottom. So if you think about it, I'm not moving them out of the parentheses. So there's really still understood to be parentheses right here. I just am not messing with that -3 yet. I'm going to leave them out of it. So the b that was on the top was not a negative exponent. He stays. The b to the -2 that was on the bottom was an exponent, negative exponent. He moves. So I'm going to clean this up. So I got my 4 still. Oops, I forgot there was an a on the bottom that didn't move. So there's this guy right here. All right, I'm going to clean it up. B to the first times b to the second would be b to the third if you add the exponents. And a to the second times a to the first on the bottom would be a to the third. All right, now if you're going to do that and ignore that -3, just don't fall asleep, because we haven't actually done it yet. All right, well, what's being raised to the -3 power? Everything is. So everything is going to move. So my 4b cubed down at the bottom, my a to the third up to the top. What happens to negative exponents when you move them? They become positive. That's the point. One last step to do. What's the rule for exponents when one's in and one's out? You times them. So if I times them, I get a to the 9th over b to the 9th. And the only question is, what's 4 cubed? And 4 cubed is 64. And that's it. So that had a lot of steps to it. But again, the point, guys, is anything being raised to a negative exponent, move it. Because if you move it, no more negative, easier to do. All right, hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching. That brings us to the end of section 3.1. Take it easy.